guess. I don't know. You can if you want. How are you?
I'm crazy.
All right. Go ahead and call the Thursday, June 1st, 2023 Capital Funding Protection Committee meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Devin Reese. Miguel Martinez. Charlene Bybee. Here. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Clara Andriola. Here. Jeannie Herman. Justin Ivory.
Here.
Andrew Diss.
Here.
Elise Bunkowski. Here. Chris Cobb.
Here.
And Dave Solaro.
Here. All right. We do have a couple of guests in the audience, so I'm going to take a moment to jump to item 3.01 at the chance of being skewered if I don't. So, so with that, I'd like to go ahead and open up public comment at this time. If we can go ahead and have public comment. And before we get to the cards, we have a couple of trustees that I'd like to go ahead and have do the public comment first. So we have Trustee Nicolette and Trustees President Smith, I think, is going to start us off, but Trustee Nicolette is here as well.
I was wondering why the sound wasn't on. Back in 2016, when our community chose to invest in our schools and our communities, your committee was a big part of that, because all the work that we do with the taxpayer dollars that we're entrusted with pass through this group. And that kind of sunlight and transparency is exactly what we want for our community, for local government, and for the ways that we invest that money. And so on behalf of our board, we want to say thank you so much. We arrive at better decisions because of the process you have in place. You are all professionals and honored public servants in your own way. And again, we serve our children in the best way. We serve our staff in the best way. And we serve our generations of Nevadans that are coming up that will hold these seats in the future in the best way, thanks to the partnership that you extend to our Board of Trustees and our school district. So thank you so much. We know that this is hard work. It is thankless work, but it has such an impact, and we are very grateful for you. And now I am very honored to also call up for the next speaker, our Vice President of the Washoe County School Board, Dr. Diane Nicolette.
Thank you, thank you. Well, you can never be thanked enough, right? So thank you again from all the trustees. We really do understand that this is a deep dive, and we know it's very important, as we know you know it's very important. I brought with me today's packet, minus 37 pages. So we know that you face a lot of interesting information, numbers. You have to balance your expertise with moving forward with a district of 61,000 students. And there's some tough decisions that I know that you have to make, and we as a board really appreciate that. Thank you for your expertise, for your time. Again, I want to say thank you from all of the trustees, because we really appreciate the fact that you bring forward information to us that helps us understand, and you each carry an expertise with you, and you are very much appreciated. And on that, please have a lovely summer. Thank you.
We have another public comment.
Pablo Nava Duran.
So I wanted to say thank you for the best service community, and we do know it's not an easy decision. We know like many of the students who grew up in a system neighborhood doesn't always go to the new school or new school. If you look at the inner city and Spark area, many of us students attend older school that more than 60 years old. And we guys know that we built a new Vaughan Middle School that opened out. That could be best interest for the student who usually doesn't attend the older school. And now I think Northeast Reno Sun Valley can go to school at Hug High School with the new school. That's great. And that one will come up in 2026. And then for 2027 or 2028, that one in Spark area, we build a new middle school, either Sparks or Trainer, and bring the community together as a whole rather than split up a community. And then there was Sparks and Trainer, so we make it one huge middle school, 14,000 capacity of one type. That's the goal. And then once all the new middle school in Spark area was built, all the middle school will be torn down and then build a new elementary school, 700,000 capacity, similar to Porquillas. And that build a new elementary school that will be served as the student who live in Spark area will have technical new school. And also, I mentioned that I heard Pines close. It kind of make me sad, but I feel this is the best interest for the student and for the community to tear down Pine Middle School when once a new Vaughan Middle School was built, and then tear down and make a new elementary school over here, and then give opportunity for a new area resident, maybe all the southern central Reno area could go attend to a newer school, and I think this is the best interest. Hopefully we'll continue to advance the student, not just for a newer community that newly built, but for the older community as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
That's all.
All right, that'll close out item 3.01. That'll take us back to item 2.01, which is the approval of the minutes for the April 6, 2023 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'd open it up for a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second the motion. Bybee.
Okay, motion by Anderson, second by Bybee. Any conversation on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. That will take us on to item 2.02, presentation, discussion, and possible action to accept the revised fiscal year 2024-2028 5-year capital improvement plan. Looks like we've got Mr. Searcy and Mr. Mathers.
Hi, good evening. Just a brief intro for the record. Adam Searcy, Chief Operating Officer. This item went before the Capital Funding Protection Committee in our last meeting, April, and then it was unanimously recommended for approval to the Board of Trustees. We took that to the Board of Trustees at the subsequent board meeting where they had a variety of comments and ultimately made an amended motion of approval, which actually per the Board Policy 9405, which is included in your packet, I believe, or actually it isn't, it's referenced on the website, sorry, but an obscure requirement of the board policy governing this committee is that the Board of Trustees actually does not have the authority to unilaterally modify or overrule the recommendation of the committee. It's incumbent on them to return any revised motions or denials of recommendations back to the committee for reconsideration. So we'll get into the details of what those changes are, but I just wanted to give that background as to why we're here, in part, why we're here again this evening with this 5-year CIP. So I'll turn the next bit over to Mr. Mathers.
Thank you, Adam. So Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer, for the record. We have actually 3 changes to the capital improvement program that we want to present to you for your approval. As Adam said, one of those was a board request and that's the most significant change to the CIP that Adam will go through as the third item. The first two items are somewhat technical items that are changes, so that when we knew we were coming back to this committee for revised CIP, we had contemplated these changes and now have the opportunity to present them to you as well. And just as confirmation or clarification to you, CIPs just need to be finalized and submitted to the state by August 1st. So that gives us a little time to make these kinds of adjustments. But the first change I have for you is related to the, I'm sure you've heard of it, the Duffield Foundation's donation of $35 million to the school district for various improvements in Klein High School. And normally in the district, when we receive donations, it goes through our donations fund, a special revenue fund, and we manage expenses out of that fund. So normally, for a garden variety kind of gift or donation, it would all be handled in that fund. Upon further reflection, based on my reading of state budgeting laws and conversations internally, I feel like a project of that magnitude should be reflected in the capital improvement program, and it had not been heretofore. So we are including that 35+ million of donations now and the actual project, the Incline High School improvements, in the revised CIP. So specifically, if you look at page 1 under the revenue section, about halfway through, you'll see a new line item for donations, and $35,230,293 reflected there. And then on page 2, under expenditures, you'll see the actual capital project. It's the second line under construction projects reflected there, and Adam's highlighting that for you on the screen. And then this is specifically referenced in the actual fund slide or page, which is will be page 10. So pages 1 and 2 are summary, and then page 10 is the fund statement for the Government Services Tax Fund, where this will be reflected. So the fund will receive that donation of $35 million, and then again, there's budgeted capital expenditures of $35 million. Again, this is kind of up to the discretion of the district, but I just felt like, again, this is a significant capital project and should be reflected in this document. So that's the first change I have for you. Project obviously pays for itself.
Just real quick, I mean, that's an incredible donation, $35 million to the district. Can you give us a little bit about the family that's making it, what the money specifically is going to go to?
Sure, I'll give that a shot. So this is the Dave and Cheryl Duffield Foundation. This is a benefactor that's been very generous to the district in a few other instances, specifically at the Incline Village schools. On this one in particular, my understanding is that they have a middle school age child entering high school, and that they desired certain specifically culinary CTE type of physical spaces to be available. There are a couple other scope elements, but that's maybe one of the more prominent elements of this project. And they approached the school district via the principal about, how can we enhance and improve the opportunities at this school, specifically that our child might be able to benefit from them. Since then, we've worked closely with the foundation, entered into an agreement. This is obviously a significant project that's, a full-scale design, and it's currently out to bid right now. So, I think that's the summary, but it's really a wonderful benefit for everyone at that school and for generations to come.
Great. And then the second change, which is fairly technical, involves a planned bond sale, a planned sale of our rollover bonds. We had budgeted sales of $100 million of rollover bonds, and originally we expected to issue all $100 million in the current fiscal year. So how that was reflected, so the sale would precede actual construction contracts being let. So in the CIP that was presented to you, we issued 40 million, which left 60 million to be issued. What the CIP we presented to you showed was the issuance of that 60 million in the current year, which then created a beginning fund balance of 70 plus million, 9 million plus the 60 million in proceeds in one of our funds. So I know this is technical. What we've decided to do is defer the sale of the $60 million of rollover bonds to fiscal year 24. So now in the revised CIP you see, there is that bond sale that is now plugged into fiscal year 23-24. So if you go on page 1, under rollover bond issuance, you can see $254,970,000 budgeted for rollover bond issuance. That's $60 million higher than what we had presented to you in April. In April, we presented to you sale of $194,970,000. And then we've lowered the beginning fund balance for that fund by the equivalent $60 million. So we're basically shifting the timing of a $60 million rollover bond issuance from the current fiscal year to next fiscal year. So those two changes are reflected here under the revenue side. It doesn't change the pacing of construction projects or anything. It's just we're lowering the beginning fund balance of a fund and raising the projected bond sales in that same fund. So it's a net change of 0, but I just wanted to highlight it to you if you were comparing numbers. So that's the second change. Hopefully that was clear enough. And then the third change, I think Adam wants to talk about.
Thanks, Mark. So the item that came as a revised motion from the Board of Trustees, I think for context, for brevity, we've omitted it, but for context, the 5-year CIP in April was accompanied by a lengthy presentation that highlighted the majority of these line items and projects and the logic behind their timing and the demand or the need case for most of them. Some have a good deal of flexibility built in them. Of course, year 1 or FY24 has a lot more specificity associated with it. But as you get further into the future, this is a plan, right? And so presenting that same information to the Board of Trustees, the discussion ensued that the administrative or central services offices that's shown here on page 2, about a third of the way down the page, was previously depicted or programmed in years 3 and 4. There's, again, a fair amount of flexibility to that. It was more a narrative of this is a significant and well understood need of the district that's motivated by a variety of factors, not the least of which including the district's disconnectedness of its central services staff, its inability to co-locate and thereby collaborate optimally within the same building, and a desire to modernize this very facility and bring the departments that need to work together to help support schools under one roof. And that a project in that range of time period and in that range of scale should be programmed into future years to be designed, et cetera. So that was supported previously by this committee, recommended to the trustees, where it was also supported, but that the discussion was to return, or the amended motion was to return to the committee with a recommendation to actually accelerate the funding or the program timing of that. So we're back here this evening in accordance with the board policy with an amended CIP, not only because of the changes that we needed to make that Mark just detailed, but at the request, basically, or the amended motion of the board, to propose a revised CIP illustrating that same scope for those same dollar amounts in years 2 and 3 of this CIP rather than years 3 and 4. So I think that adequately summarizes the discussion and the amended motion that's being returned to the committee. This one, just for housekeeping purposes, several of the items as we normally do here going forward, are for discussion only, and we'll have action at the end. This one, however, is a standalone item for your consideration and potential action. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions? Mr. Cobb?
Just in doing that, with shifting this, does that impact at all your revitalization, modernization that we're talking about for our inner city schools?
You know, it does not. The same numbers specifically, you're referring to these facility modernization projects. Those numbers are the same as they were proposed in the previous CIP. And from a funding standpoint, we do have the flexibility to accommodate that from one year to the other.
So key there, we're still moving forward with us. It does not change that, doesn't take that away from these communities. It just gives you an ability to start this earlier.
That's accurate, yes.
Okay.
Adam, will we be keeping this building then? This lot will not be sold to any other entity?
So great question, and the short answer is that remains to be seen. The
Okay.
presentation was, you know, this is an appropriate budget amount for a replacement facility that may be built to suit on this property. It may be acquire elsewhere and remodel. It may be acquire elsewhere and build to suit. That has not been officially determined.
If this lot sells, what happens to the proceeds of that sale? Does it go back into this fund for redistribution?
It does. I think it's noteworthy that the district has recently entered into an agreement, essentially a first right of refusal. If we were to sell this property, the offer must first go to the University of Nevada. However, with any real property sales for the district, we're bound by law that the proceeds must be retained in a building and sites fund that, you know, must be reinvested basically into the same uses that we see here.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Justin Ivory for the record. Mr. Mathers, one of the numbers, and I didn't check this one, so I'm just going off memory, but for some reason, I thought our 5-year total in revenues was around $1.5 billion last month when we checked that. And now it was in like 1.5 something billion dollars. So when you had the 95 million, I'm like, okay, maybe, but you're saying that the 60 offset itself. So I'm a little confused as to why this number has gone bigger.
Sure. So this is a 5-year plan that begins next fiscal year. So it doesn't reflect the resource of any issuance that we make this year or in past years. So that's why there would be an increase to resources when we've programmed now 60 million more in bond sales for year one that were planned basically for year 0 that you don't see. So we've got 60 million more in a rollover bond sale program for 24 that was anticipated to be in 23, but the CIP in front of you doesn't include fiscal year 23. So that's an increase of 60 million, and then there's the 35 for the Duffield project.
Okay, so the forward balance then doesn't necessarily apply to this one so much as it would last or 2 months ago.
Correct. Let me show you though where that's reflected. If you go to page 1, you can see the beginning fund balance of all funds in year 1 of 116 million. That used to be 178. So that's why I say the 60 million, right, is a net zero change, but that's not reflected in revenues because beginning fund balance isn't a revenue. Sorry, I have to get technical on you, but that's, if that helps you connect the dots. So we lowered the beginning fund balance by $60 million that you see. It went from 178 to 116. And then the rollover bond issuance amount went from 194 to 255. But again, when you look at revenues, it doesn't include beginning fund balance. So that's the explanation.
I see what you're saying. So we're picking up the 60 million in the rollover bond issuance and then the 35 million. So we basically increased our budget, our 5-year, by 95 million, which is our 1.5 to 1.6.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, next question, I'm just going to, if I can, to Adam, just address the elephant in the room. How old is this facility? And how old are the facilities that we want to be rebuilding in the future? It's something that we talked about when this first came in front of us, which was, it felt a little self-serving to come in here and build a new administration building before we can even, I mean, we're going to have schools that are going to be, if I'm not mistaken, 20 plus years older than this facility. And we're saying they're going to have to wait a little bit while we create a new facility here. So if you could give us a little background on kind of where that stuff is at.
Sure, I appreciate you asking the tough questions. We did talk about that a little bit last time. Not certain, don't quote me on the exact year, but this building was opened in approximately 1964. So this is pushing 60 years old, and approximately 50% of our schools are 50 years old or older. Quite a number, I'm not sure, in the 25 range of number of schools are 60 years old or older. So there are quite a few schools across the district that are of that era, baby boomer, 1950, 1960 era schools. As we mentioned earlier, we feel we have the resources, or we do have the resources to bring to bear at this pace towards those schools. They can't all be done at once, right? So to be fair, when we ultimately land the facility modernization program, it will take many years to execute all of those projects. We can do that program and an administrative facility concurrently from a resource standpoint. But to be fair, not everybody can go first. And so, we'll be working closely. That's what we're doing with the facilities modernization plan also, to try to quantify and articulate the need and the prioritization. And also, there's a lot of potential change involved with some of that. So doing it at a pace that's healthy for the community as well is something we're taking into consideration. But I think, just for the record, I appreciate you noting it. There are dozens of schools across the district that are 50 to 60 years old or older. That isn't necessarily an indictment on their effectiveness. Whereas with this particular facility, it's dramatically undersized for the district, the organization as it exists today. And I think that's, as much as anything, part of the rationale that the board wanted to communicate to the committee.
And I can appreciate all that, I really can. But I think it also has to be stated, though, that if we can, kind of on the earlier question is this going to get in the way of another school getting rebuilt? The reality is, if we can juggle this rebuild and a school rebuild, in theory, we could juggle 2 school rebuilds while pushing this one back. And I think it's important to be said, because otherwise it sounds like, no, we could either do this and one of the new schools, or we could just do one of the new schools and then this one gets pushed back and starts in 3 years. But the reality is, if we weren't doing this one, right, we could actually start with 2 new rebuilds, pushing this one back. Am I understanding that correctly?
Your logic is sound. Yeah, that's fair.
Monkowski.
So are there lease options available for relocating or for expanding this facility? One of my big concerns as a community member at large is the school safety, and I think that there are some schools, my son goes to a school that is on lockdown frequently. Potentially that might be a better use of money to start improving some upgrades for security at this point, where we could also explore lease options for administrative staff.
Sure, absolutely. I think any long-term central services facility solution will include optimized exercise of who all needs to be co-located at one facility and who might adequately or more cost effectively be relocated, perhaps at a repurposed school site, such as the Brown Center, if you guys are familiar with that location. So it's not like every non-site-based personnel is going to have to live in one brand new building. You know, we would prefer to not lease space like we do today, actually, if we're able to fund it permanently. To your point about investments in our existing schools with regards to safety, that's certainly a prominent aspect of our facility modernization work as well. So to Mr. Ivory's point, and also will be a significant element of one of our other items this evening, our capital renewal program. I don't know if that entirely answers your question, but we'll look to optimize how many people we put in a new central services facility.
Yeah, it does answer the question, but to Mr. Ivory's point, I think there's other critical needs right now of the school district that maybe don't include administration. I don't mind putting that on the record, so thank you.
Thank you.
Just, yeah, no, I do have one. It's really more of a process comment, I suppose. Really, at the end of the day, though, this capital improvement plan is funded for the first year and not the out years. The out years are a plan. And while I appreciate the trustees wanting to bring, you know, the administrative portion of the needs of the school district forward, that doesn't mean that they are actually funded, and that is where these stick at this point. You know, someone that deals with capital funds on a daily basis, I just want to make sure that, you know, the change that is being requested here, at least in my mind, is kind of that optics piece of we need this to perform our duties to provide the schooling resources across the district in a more efficient and effective way. We've all had these conversations before, whether, you know, we're let's say rich in the capital side of the world, but we're pretty poor in the actual operation side of the world for the school district. And I think I'm just, you know, I didn't watch the meeting, but I'm guessing that the trustees are noticing that there are some efficiencies potentially that could be brought forward to help with the operational side of the world by consolidating into one building. And I totally get that and understand that. But at the end of the day, am I correct that the only funding that is being approved with this capital plan right now is year one, and years 2 through 5 are still just a plan?
That's right. Only year one is appropriated for actual expenditures. Yeah,
And this could change again next year in the process.
probably will.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Ivory.
Mr. Searcy, have you got an explanation on any true real advantage to pushing this up 1 year? Because that's what we're basically talking about, right? We would open a new administrative building 1 year earlier, and I guess my question becomes, what does that get us? Is there like something that we're trying to, you know, I know we don't have matching funds coming from the feds, stuff like that, but is there something that gets us? I guess my question is, what is the rationale to bumping it forward a year? Because it just seems arbitrary, for lack of better, right?
I will state that I'm not here to advocate for or against this motion or speak on behalf of the trustees on this one. I will state that there's not an external variable that is motivating the timeline on this, like some expiring funds or something of that nature. I think we've generally articulated the need case for this project in general, and I'll leave it at that.
I would agree. There's no doubt there's a need base, right? The real question becomes, optically, where is the need base most needed? And I don't know if we're able to do this, but perhaps we have a school board member here. Perhaps she would like to enlighten us a little bit as to maybe the reasoning behind why bumping this up 1 year. It would help me. Unfortunately, I missed watching that meeting. I'm not sure how.
I shouldn't comment, but I will say your questions are excellent. Thank you.
One thing, if I could add, that was clearly stated on the record by the trustees, was that they would graciously accept a non-approval from the committee of their amended motion. That they had their discussion, they had their opinions, they did approve the amended motion, but it was made clear on the record by them that they were open to dissent from the committee on this one. I think that's a fair characterization of that discussion.
As the chairman stated, it's being a 5-year plan, years 2, 3, and 4. Right now, they're not hard and fast. They're not funded. You still have to finish the facility modernization project plan. So we're still waiting to see what that looks like ultimately, right? So if you come back to us next year, that's going to be a conversation, I think, where we have that opportunity to look at what you're showing as a prioritization, and we as a committee can sit here and go, looking at those schools and in comparison, looking at your administration building, we as a committee and members are able to vote on what we see as that prioritization. Correct?
That's correct. We anticipate concluding the study by the end of 2023. And that'll be back before the committee. And that's a study, that's a plan as well. But it will inform future years of the CIP. And to Chair Solero's point, as you know, this is an annual review that can and will change for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Member Ivory, and I think it's a matter of optics. And maybe on this board, this commission, we are here as the watchdogs for the capital funding protections. So we're protecting that bond money. I think all of us, because we come from diverse representation intentionally, to the community, to our cities, to the county, to private businesses, of watching how that money is spent and being transparent, being responsible. So I feel, my responsibility is to the community, and in agreeing with Mr. Ivory, I think the optics of the administration building, where we had it, is where it should be, and moving it up, even if we don't wind up moving up kind of sends a message that, and I understand the Board of Trustees, and I understand the need. I mean, the need is there, but I really agree with what is our priority here, and I think it's the schools, and yes, the services are part of that, but the actual schools and so many older schools and the quality of education and what they have at each facility that can enhance directly each kid who goes to those 60-year-old schools more quickly, and is more important to me than administrative offices. And I really kind of feel, because this committee is representing the community, that for me, that's a higher priority. And we can come to year 2 and see where we stand fiscally and get the modernization plan. And maybe we'll go, well, you know what, here's priorities for the older schools. And does it make sense to start on, or just keep it at year 3? Or could we do both? But I think changing it right now sends a message for me that this facilities are more important than those older schools that our kids are going to. So just my opinion. Thank you.
Any other, Anderson?
I have a question. If you could remind me on years 1 and 2, out of the construction projects listed, has anything been pulled or changed from what we had there?
Just for clarification, you mean pulled or changed since the April version or presentation?
Correct, and specifically with the admin being moved forward, is it altering anything to what we already had listed and reviewed for the upgrades?
In short, no. No, this line item in year 2 associated with admins, these two line items, years 2 and 3, were merely moved forward from years 3 and 4 from previous. No other changes from what was approved previously have been made, other than the addition of the donation project associated with Incline High School that we talked about previously.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, this is an action, this is an action item. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll take a stab at it. I'd like to make a motion that we don't move this, and we send it back to the Board of Trustees with our apologies, but we feel as though we put the time and effort into it. And we're not saying that it's obviously locked in stone, because we've got some flexibility there, but for right now, I feel as though you could figure out the wording on this. Let's just say we do not accept the recommendation of the Board of Trustees. Would that be an okay? I'm sorry, on item 3. Item 1 and 2 are just fine.
Got a motion?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this item? All right, seeing no discussion, go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. I guess that motion passes. All right, thank you very much. That will take us on to item 2.03, but I do need to do one thing really quickly. We do have a new member with us this evening, County Commissioner Andriola, and I missed that at the beginning, joining us for the first time this evening, so welcome. Absolutely. So, Mr. Searcy, let's take it on to item 2.03, presentation and discussion of the fiscal year 2024 information technology device refresh.
Thanks again. I'm going to relinquish this seat to these fine gentlemen. This is a standalone item that will be for action here later in the agenda, but just by way of orientation, this is an FY24 allocation of capital funds, specifically, as they will describe, to refresh a portion of the district's IT device infrastructure. It's a relatively new element of our capital program. I believe this is a 3rd iteration of this. A lot has changed, a lot has improved. This program has matured and added value to the school district, and that's really the intro. I'll turn it over to these gentlemen to walk you through the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I'm Chris Turner, Chief Information Officer for Washoe County School District, and I'll let my colleague Don Angotti introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Don Angotti. I'm the Associate Chief over Area 5.
So our agenda for the presentation, as you can see on the screen, is we'll discuss the background on the refresh program, how we built it, how we sustain it. My colleague, Mr. Angotti, will talk about the academic benefits, having been a recent school principal, and then we'll summarize. So, this is our 3rd year doing this, and we're excited to again talk about what the annual device refresh means for the school district. To begin with, we started this program because it aligns with both our strategic technology plan for the department and also the district's strategic plan, the response to recovery. Our overall effort, we initiated this project because there was sort of an inequity in terms of how many modern devices were populating each of the buildings. We had a mix of buildings that were newly constructed and outfitted one-to-one with technology, student laptops and teacher laptops. Then there are other buildings that receive supplemental title funding, and they were able to purchase technology. And then there was a large maybe 50% of our school buildings had a mix of funding opportunities that maybe left those students and those teachers behind in terms of technology. And so our goal for the program was, one, to make it more equitable for all of our students and teachers, to even out the space, to leverage our economic opportunities by buying all the laptops centrally and processing them and distributing them rather than having the schools do them individually. But most importantly, or maybe co-importantly, I can't say, I don't want to rank order these, but we felt it was really important, me as a former classroom teacher, but I felt like it was really important for principals to get back to being the lead teacher instead of also the procurer and the bidder and the identifier and the purchaser for laptops. We felt like we could centralize the process and make it more advantageous, more efficient, but also we felt like it's too much to ask of the school principal when they can be in classrooms supporting teaching and learning. So the details of the program are unchanged. Our goal is, due to the amount of funding that is available to us, we want to purchase, there's this complex sort of number you see there at the top bullet. We want all schools to be at least, we want to purchase new devices that matches up with about 80% of the enrollment, because that's the limits of the resources that we have available to us. We also want to ensure, for safety and security reasons, that all devices in the district are at least 5 years old or newer. And we're building ourselves to that level, and we're happy about that. Teacher devices is a special discussion in today's conversation because, as you can see there, all teachers now have new devices. Our plan was to renew teacher devices year over year at a 20% rate. So every teacher would get a new computer every 5 years. And so the last teachers, the teachers with the newest computers 2 years ago would get a new computer at the end of the cycle. But fortunate for us, there was federal funding, a federal grant that was available to us, to which we successfully applied. The Federal Communications Commission provided us with $2 million, and every teacher laptop was renewed last year. Having said that, we will be participating in renewing teacher laptops in this next round, because we will take those brand new, so we have 1-year-old computers by the time we refresh the teacher laptops in this next cycle. And we'll take those computers and we'll repurpose them to students or staff members that aren't covered under the refresh plan, because we have approximately 4,000 teachers, but we also have 4,000 staff members, and they're working under a variety of conditions that may allow or disallow the refresh of their devices too. So what they will receive is the 1-year-old computers that the teachers will be giving up as they get refreshed, and it just keeps our 20% renewal rate on schedule. And then one thing that we one criteria that's important that we identified in this process was our K2 students don't use keyboarded devices; they use tablets. We've landed on iPads as our model of choice, and so any of the leftover funds, after we do 80% of our student enrollment and 20% of our teachers, any of the leftover funding is dedicated to purchasing iPads for our K2 students at elementary schools. You'll see that we're trying to renew at a 30% of a school's enrollment rate, and it seems low, but when you think about a K5 building, we're trying to cover only 3 grades, K1 and 2. So how did we get here? The funding sources, as you can see there, we had opportunities like I already discussed with the FCC $2 million grant. We had ESSER federal relief funding, and then of course we've had the opportunity to, this is our 3rd year, we hope to continue with this process with the Capital Funding Protection Committee. The project's details include, we have a project manager on staff who part of her role is to she investigates the enrollment of a school, she follows up with principals on how many teachers are in the building, and she also coordinates, very importantly for us in this process, the e-waste process. So we want to move away from using devices that are out of date and perhaps not as secure as they could be. We also want to clean up our inventory. We want to be in a space where computers aren't left in a closet unused. We want to ensure that all the computers that are in use in the school district in our classrooms are modern, up-to-date, and safe. The budgeting and procurement process, that's all handled through our project manager. We have built an asset management tool during the pandemic. We developed a database that helps us track all the devices in the district. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 115,000 computers now. And that asset manager helps us be a lot more strategic about what we own, where it lives, how it's used, who's checking it out, and also the age of the device. So it defaults, there's a checkbox in that asset manager that allows us to see what devices are 7 years old or older, and I ran that report just before the presentation today. And I'll discuss those details in a moment, but that kind of tool allows us to really identify very specifically where the old devices are and what needs to go to the e-waste. And then that asset manager also helps support all of the logistics that go behind this procurement process. It helps us anticipate the imaging needs, the processing needs, the shipping needs, those kinds of things. And we're continuously looking for opportunities to streamline that process, and we identified some advantages last year where we're having a third party do all the processing and then ship the devices directly to the schools. It hastens the process, and we're very happy with that performance so far. So, how did we get here? This is a recap of that was sort of the broad recap, but here are the details on slide 5, I think I'm on. In year 1, fiscal year 2022, we were able to purchase, as you can see, 8,913 student devices. We purchased 735 teacher devices, and we were able to acquire 1,200 iPads. And then you can see the significant e-waste that took place, 9,000 Windows devices and 632 iPads. The iPad number jumps up in the succeeding year this year because we looked at the operating systems of all of our iPads in our inventory, and we found that some of the iPads, this nearly 5,000, were out of compliance. They were no longer upgrade able. We couldn't upgrade the system, the operating system, and so that made them that deprecated their use. We were unable to ensure the safety of those devices, so we were forced to e-waste those at that large number, and we feel like it was an unfortunate choice because it leaves schools without tablets for use with those K2 students, but the overriding concern was the safety of our environment and the safety of our students and staff. So we are anticipating a real sharp look at how best we can replace those 5,000 iPads within the budget that remains after we do the student and teacher devices this year. And so moving forward for this fiscal year, we're anticipating, again, the 20% renewal of the teacher devices. We have approximately, I quoted 4,000 earlier. It says here 3,800 teachers. The costs remain largely the same. This is the same cost as last year, $650 for a teacher device. And so that expenditure is real close to $500,000. The student device, that remains at $400. And so the complexity is we're looking at 80% of our total student enrollment, and if you break it up in 5 years, that's 20% per year. So out of approximately 61,000 students, we will be refreshing somewhere in the neighborhood of 9,000 to 10,000 devices at $400 per device. That's $4 million. And then the remainder of those funds, whatever is left over, will buy iPads for our K2 students. Any questions on the technical details, the IT portion?
Can you explain on the iPads that the e-waste iPads, was it the particular year of that iPad? Was it the age of the iPad, the operating systems, it just had aged out, or was there glitches in a particular year that they were issued that would, I mean, that's a lot.
It is a
compared to
lot.
what you've done. And as we look forward when we're purchasing, what are you considering as we look at new iPads and their systems and longevity for them?
Excellent question. It wasn't a particular lot of iPads. What we had was, what we found throughout the district using our inventory tool was we had a lot of iPads that were purchased around the year of 2013 and before. So it had to do with the year that they were acquired, the year that they were manufactured, and how long they'd been in use for us. And so what happens is, if you have a tablet or if you have a phone, you'll eventually reach the end of life where the manufacturer no longer supports an upgrade to the operating system, and that's the dead end we ran into, and that's why that number. When we realized that, we emphasized the upgradability and the safety of our users over just having a tablet in their hands. So we felt like we'd prefer to live in a space of safety rather than they can use it with a teacher's supervision in the classroom only.
With that, because I hang on to the iPhones until I have to. I had a 5 and 8s wear out. I don't. It just, I think where you were going is it's kind of painful to see that number. Is there, rather than e-waste, and I know the operating system working, is there any opportunity in our lower income areas, rather than e-waste these, to get these in the hands of students that may not have anything at home? It's painful to see the desktop number and the iPad number. To see
Yeah.
that.
I'm not in the business of trashing things very easily. I'm miserly by nature. The problem is it's not just the operating system that's not upgradable. It's also all the tools that go into the iPad. So the applications pieces, like some of the learning tools that are embedded on there, those will continue to work. But the software that we embed on the tablet, that the content filtering system and our security system that keeps the threat actors away from attacking us, those are the pieces that that force us to e-waste them. Because I agree with you 100%. We would prefer people to use them even in a controlled environment like on our network with a teacher's supervision. But with the nature of external threats, and we just felt like that overrode any sort of need that might happen on a case-by-case basis, matching up with those conditions.
I've got several questions, actually. One is, how much does it cost to e-waste a device?
That can vary. We're changing vendors. We e-waste such an amount that sometimes it's cost neutral. That the vendor takes it. We sign an agreement with an e-waste vendor, and they ensure that there's data destruction that takes place on the storage of the device, so the hard drives or the laptops, the desktops, or the tablets, and they're bound by that contract. And then what they do is they repurpose them in their own way and then resell them. So that's why it's cost neutral to us. It hasn't, up to this point, as far as I recall, it hasn't cost us any money.
Okay. I think we'd be well served then to perhaps, I get the fact that these might have been really old, 10 years old or whatever, maybe battery life, whatever. But I would think in the future, it might be better to look at some low-income families, something that, rather than throwing these away, that we could scrub them, right? And then basically do what your e-waste device manager's doing now, or the company's doing now, and then rather than resell them, just give these away. But let's go back a little bit. how much did we spend on the IT device refresh? What was the budget for it in the very first year we did this?
I believe it was 4.5 million.
Does that sound right? 4.5 million? And last month, we approved in our, I gotta lose all my paperwork here. Last month, or not last month, last meeting, I think we approved again 4.5 million. So how come we're at 4.7 now?
I don't have the answer.
I know,
for
I
that.
saw,
I'm
I
sorry.
saw Mr. Mathers leave, and I was thinking to myself, somebody catch him.
I got it. Sorry about that. For the record, Adam Searcy. I'm just speculating where you're getting these numbers from. Last month, the committee approved this 5-year CIP, which is just a plan, just an allocation. Every single one of those projects has to come back individually and receive approval. This is no different. So this is not in addition to anything that was approved last meeting by the committee. This is us actually coming back and pre-approving previously allocated funds in the CIP for FY24.
Okay, you might want to hang tight. I got a few more questions. I'm going I'm going back off memory because I don't have all the paperwork in front of me, but I recall when we first started the IT refresh, it was going to be iPads for the students. And then we received an allocation of money from the feds, which allowed us to get a whole bunch of them, right? We were supposed to start this off originally for those that weren't here then, where we was going to buy 20% every year, and then at year 5, these 20% get recycled, whatever, and then the new 25% or new 20%. Then we got federal money, and we were able, basically, I think federal COVID money or something, we were basically able to buy all the devices, which allowed us to fast forward the process. Is that correct? Am I stating that right?
Yeah, we didn't buy, we were able to purchase all teacher devices. So we were able to cover the nearly 4,000 teachers last year. We did receive federal monies that accelerated the purchase of student devices, but we didn't do all 20% with that federal money, and we didn't do all 80% with that federal money. But what we did was we used the 20% that was our target with CIP money, and then I think we over-purchased above that 20% threshold in that first year using federal supplemental dollars in order to help with the inventory levels at the schools. Remember
Charging
during the
cards, stuff like that.
Yeah, the pandemic revealed that there was big disparities in the district in terms of who had computers and who didn't, and so that first year of the program, we took what we knew about the pandemic and we applied as much cash to the process to kind of jumpstart it as possible.
Okay. Early on, I recall having a discussion about where do the teachers get their laptops currently when this whole thing first started. And I remember the answer to be they get them from a discretionary fund from the principal that basically came out of general fund money. And I see a grin back here because I know where everyone's going with this. We're here to protect the money. I remember asking the question and then kind of looking around at the committee going, I don't think this is what we're supposed to be doing with this money. We're supposed to be protecting this money for certain things. So if it was originally coming out of general fund money, okay, and now we got federal money that buys all new devices for all the teachers, which is, don't get me wrong, this is awesome, right? But then where does it fall upon this committee's responsibility to refresh those, and it doesn't fall upon the general fund money to refresh those, would be my question.
Well, that's a good question. The problem that we were trying to overcome at the time was, you're absolutely correct. It was discretionary money based on a building principal's ability to pay and then their own prioritization. And so we had buildings that had principals that prioritized that, and then we had buildings where priorities were placed in other spaces. So what we wanted to do, because of the program, was we wanted to ensure that all of our teachers had modern access to computing technology in order to best teach in the environment that we're creating in this, with all our new buildings and all the integrations into the classroom. Now we're in year 3 of that. We did refresh all of the computers last year, but the general fund budget is constrained to the point that that's why the principals made those choices. Some buildings had computers and some buildings did not emphasize that. So to overcome that problem, we're asking the Capital Funding Protection Committee to continue with this program because of the pressure on the general fund. What we found is it's not enough to sustain the program as we've designed it here, and so outside of the general fund, we're asking this committee for this. Does that summarize it, Adam? If you're following along.
Yeah,
As he's checking his
if I
notes.
could, just another way of responding to that. This is an eligible expense for our capital resources. I'm looking actually at our CIP funding details list to confirm. I've just found it. So I think Mr. Mathers has attested to this in the past, but I'm certain that, part of the story, I guess, behind this is that this is not actually being funded out of WC1 revenues per se. It's not. This is actually listed on page 9 of the CIP. These are property tax revenues, and they are what we refer to as pay-go, cash revenues, not debt issuance. So that's just a little bit of context. This is a need of the district. This is an eligible expense for these funds, and an opportunity for us to enhance the learning environment through basically furniture, fixture, and equipment investment like we do in our new schools, for all the reasons that Mr. Turner just described.
And I can certainly appreciate that wholeheartedly, if not for the fact that 10 years ago, that money didn't come out of any of these funds for the teachers' laptops, and now it does. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I truly don't. I think it's a great use of resources. My question becomes, where does the line in the sand get drawn, right? Everyone, I've heard it several times sitting here. These aren't WC1 dollars protected, right? But we all know that when WC1 was approved, right, that was all based on the concept that we was going to pool that money with the other capital funding improvement money, and that was going to go towards building schools for our kids. That's what that was going towards. And now it's like, well, now we're going to take this money and we're going to, it can be used for it. I get it. Because the language in WC1 didn't say that all money had to be used for capital improvement. It only said WC1 had to be. But we're on the capital funding protection committees. We're overseeing all of them, all the funds coming in. So it's kind of got to get through us. And I guess my question is, like I say, it started at 4.5 million. We're up to 4.7. We've got all the a big majority of these. In fact, when this IT process started, it was 4.5 million. There was 0 teachers' laptops. In the very first discussion we had, we didn't talk about teacher laptops. We were only talking about student laptops or student tablets. So my question is, it seems like every year we keep kind of moving the goal a little bit further and further, and sooner or later, IT stuff starts getting kind of expensive, and you start looking at things like, You know, not here, we haven't done it here, but I mean, how long before you guys are bringing it in front of us saying, hey, we need $80 million to create a computer program like the DMV's done? You know what I mean? These are things that scare the heck out of me because, you know, as a contractor, when we build something for $80 million, you're bonded, you deliver the product. It isn't always that way on the IT end of it. So my question really is for you guys is, I'm okay with purchasing this and on this IT program, but I really do want to know kind of where we're going to hit the end of the road and where we're going to say, okay, that's enough stuff that we're going to start doing out of the capital funding money that the general fund used to take care of.
I think that's a question more for CFO Mathers. This is a program that was created from, all of us coming together and trying to come up with a plan for trying to supplement the technology that's in schools, absent any sort of resource in the general fund. I can assure you that it's not going to grow to 80 million. The first year it was 4.5. Last year it dipped. It's based on the monies that are available for this program are that pay-go money that's based on the property. I don't understand the financial pieces of it, but it dipped last year down to 4 million, and now we're at 4.7. So when we originally passed this program in front of the board, it was based on the revenues could be different at year over year based on the economy and the property tax values, and so this is within the board approved program of underneath 5 million, and I understandably I wasn't privy to the financial discussions. I don't know why it's 4.7 this year, and it just landed this way.
I'm not sure why it's 4.7 either, other than usually what happens is we end up with a little extra money, so we spend it typically. And I know that when this program first started, and once again, you're not going to hear me say anything about the kids' iPads, right? We agreed to that kind of early on. We said, hey, that seems like, and we were in the pandemic. I mean, we had a lot of kids that had no way to even do at-home learning or any of that. What's been added to it is the teacher devices, right? That was never a part of what we talked about we were going to do in year one. That's been added now. It's been paid for by the federal government. And my biggest concern is if we say no to the teachers' tablets right now, I think it puts a little more pressure back on the teachers and the staff to go back after more federal money, whereas if we just agree to pay for it and replace them year after year after year, there's no real incentive for anybody to ever go back after the federal money that kind of got us in the first place of having to replace and not only replace but obviously get rid of at the same time. So I'll get off my soapbox.
I think it would be good to hear the rest of the presentation about the kind of the benefits of this, because I do recall those conversations we had when we started this program, and what was shown was the capital funds were buying brand new computers for brand new schools and everything was included, yet we have a whole other group of schools, much like we talked about with Refresh and the capital funding for those schools, like who really is the one picking up that tab? And I get what you're saying about the line in the sand, and maybe that's a future conversation that we can have with Mr. Searcy about, how far does this, can we create a definition that we can all agree on what is capital and what is this body's kind of piece? Where is that wall that we're going to butt up against so that we don't get this scope creep? I think that's, but that's certainly not this piece anyway. So if we can go ahead and get Mr. Ngadi, I believe, to cruise on.
Yes, Don Ngadi for the record. Thank you for the segue there. I've experienced both ways. I had the opportunity to, prior to becoming an associate chief, to open Nick Polikitis Elementary School, where it was a one-to-one school outfitted with devices. Prior to that, I was in schools where devices were a challenge. It was hard to have devices for every student. for teachers and whatnot. It was coming up with, budget money to try to make that work. Hey, we can buy 3 or we can get 5 this year, and gradually build to that. So the refresh program has been a game changer for those schools. And now being in schools and overseeing multiple schools and seeing them in students' hands and the learning that's taking place with them is great. And it's wonderful that we have this refresh program in place for those schools that aren't new and that needed that technology. I was part of the pandemic the first year we opened. We got to the third quarter mark, and that was it. So we sent kids home with devices, and it was amazing the work that was be able to accomplish with that. A parent shared with me in one case where her 3rd grade child was showing this 11th grader how to send the English assignment to the high school to submit it during the pandemic. So there was a tremendous value with those devices. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about just kind of how we're using them in schools. Our elementary schools, we were 1-to-1 at Polakitas. We switched it to it's called Tech Rich. Devices were going home. We had insurance costs went up. So we decided to go to Tech Rich, where it's a little more sustainable for our IT department to work on the devices, but also for them to maintain the amount in the classroom for students. So the devices are in carts. We purchased carts to have them in charge, the charging capabilities for them. Students can check out devices, be able to take them home if they're doing special projects, to be able to continue that work there. Our middle schools, there's laptop carts in the core classes that they're offering, as well as in the elective classes. High schools, similar in the core classes with elective classes. I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Marcy Hers earlier this week and see Passion Project. Amazing use of technology. The creativity and the innovation that the students came up with was off the charts in terms of that. Why it's of significant value. Do you want to hit that one? Thanks. Basically, the academic benefits, the refresh program provides operable computers to all students to access learning. In a lot of cases, devices go down, or they go to, they have to be sent for IT to repair. So but by having that refresh, we have multiple devices to be able to get students on to be able to improve the academic work that they're doing. Curriculum materials all have digital components. The curriculum we adopt are all digital based, so students can access the curriculum, not necessarily the textbook, but they can get into the curriculum there. Our science program, our math program, our ELA programs all have access to digital platforms through the devices. It personalizes instruction for teachers, higher levels of student engagement when you walk through classrooms and seeing students utilizing devices, provides teachers additional options for developing interactive lessons for students. Students are accessing up-to-date information. A lot of times as textbooks get older, the information becomes a little bit outdated, so it's nice that they can reference current up-to-the-minute information for their researching or their collaborative projects that they're working on. It increases collaboration opportunities for students. And as well, too, it allows students to become collaborators, constructors of knowledge, problem solvers, innovators, and responsible digital citizens through that process. And then the last piece we have here is the refresh has multiple advantages for us as a district. 1, it provides functional, usable devices for the classroom. 2, it provides academic benefits in teaching and learning. And 3, provides security benefits to keep our students safe. And I'll take any questions that you might have regarding those benefits. Yes.
Thanks. I have 2 questions. So the first is, and this is something we discussed before last go, but how do we ensure that this is used for enrichment in the classroom, not a supplementation? I want to make sure as a parent that my child is still having that instruction with the teacher. The teachers are not just assigning. So that's part 1.
Correct. So I know at my schools and a lot of our principals, we talk about active versus passive. So we want to make sure that the devices are being used for learning and not just having a device in a student's hand because I have to work with a reading group for 15 minutes. I need to occupy you. So there's a lot of conversation at the principal level with teachers to ensure the devices are being used in that role and in that capacity. Also with the enrichment intervention, we've adopted some new programs. iReady was approved, so we have an opportunity to incorporate iReady next year, which will be for all students to be able to access and utilize it that way for enrichment, but also for intervention. And it's that active-passive piece. I agree with you on that. There needs to be active engagement.
Yes. And at the higher levels, how are we ensuring curriculum changes to keep up on this technology? For example, at the high school level, I expect my kids to be coming out of high school better at Excel and Word than me, at least, right, in the office products. So how are we keeping up on those curriculum changes to make sure that they're even able to enter the workforce?
Right. So the department leads are working. They develop the curriculum. They align the structure for the curriculum with their staffs there. within the coursework, they're providing students opportunities within those classes to be able to utilize the technology. Because I agree, we want them to be literate in those skills and whatnot. The perfect example was the middle school example where they were creating a passion project and utilizing the technology for that. All of our curriculum materials have access to the digital piece as well. So students, if they have a device at home, they can access it there. If they have a device at school, or if they need a device, they can check one out to be able to utilize it that way. But it's keeping up with their coursework that way. Our high schools offer, we have Edgenuity classes for some students that might need to utilize the devices in terms of that. So there's opportunities for them to do that as well.
Yeah, I would just encourage, I will say as a parent, my child does less on Excel and Word than I did at his age. And so I think that is a really, really critical piece of this to make sure that they are coming out very proficient. I mean, I think there's really no excuse anymore for that.
Sure.
So especially at the high school levels, that is something I would really like to see if we're going to approve this.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Going back to the e-waste, I have to admit, I mean, it's bothersome for me to think of 12,000 devices or close to 12,000 going to e-waste. So a couple questions. One, I see the liability of if we did roll it out to low-income families and such, that now bad people are getting in and potentially putting the families at risk. I see that as a possibility. But have we looked at other options like the new to you computers and things like that do wipe everything out that we wouldn't want to be there for a school district, but then can load other things on for the families? Have we ever looked at the cost of doing something like that instead of, again, 12,000 units going to waste?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it does resonate with us because we don't like to discard devices that might be usable. So a couple of responses. When we have a lot of organizations in the community that donate devices to us, and so I have a relationship with the National Guard, and they donate devices to us. And what we do is, because they don't match our specifications and they're not the right model or they wouldn't fit in our charging carts, what we've done is we've taken those donations gladly, and then we flip them to the Reno Cigar Lions Club, who has a program where they take either a desktop or a laptop computer and they re-image it, make it safe, ensure that there's data integrity, and then they have a program where they donate them to those needy families in our community. And that's an ongoing effort, and we really like that relationship. That was established right when I got here in 2020. And I'm happy to say that anytime that we receive a donation of devices, and it's not one or two, we get boxes of them at a time. So it might be 40, it might be 20. And so I call my contact, they come pick them up, they re-image them and use a different operating system that's free, and then they donate them to those families, and they provide training. And it's been really, really successful. The other complication with the proposal to repurpose the devices internally, like for us to wipe them and then identify the needy families, is we don't have the personnel for that. That's why the e-waste process makes the most sense for us, because we'd need a team of folks that would take the 10,000 devices a year and wipe them and then put an operating, we have licensing issues, like could we put Windows on it? I don't think that's likely. We'd have to go with an open source operating system. We'd have to image it, and then we'd have to identify those families. So I think there's conflicts with in terms of how we're currently staffed and even trying to accomplish that. That's why we're really happy with the Reno Cigar Lions Club, who already fulfills this project. And so if I think we could take it under advisement that if some of the laptops that we get for e-waste, if they're usable, because sometimes they've been damaged, they're vandalized, they might be 1 or 2 years old, but they're no longer usable because they were damaged. So we have to identify the ones that are usable. We could probably turn and give those to the Reno Cigar Lions Club that has that program. But part of the advantage of the e-waste program is when they look at in totality what they're getting from us, which costs us nothing, they say, let's say 20, I'm just making up numbers, but 20% of the 10,000 or 5,000 are damaged and unusable, and only 20% are any good to them. That's how come that is cost neutral to us, because they look at the ones that they can use and turn and flip, and then they discard or they recycle the components of the rest of the inventory that gets donated to them. I think that's their business model, if I'm able to predict.
Any other questions on this item? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We will move on to the next informational item, 2.05, presentation and discussion to provide updates on the construction phase, 2.04, presentation and discussion on the fiscal year 2024 capital renewal plan. I almost did it again this month.
All right. Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer, here to bring to you the yearly capital renewal program for FY24. So I want to give you a little background. 2023, we're in the throes of it. We're really going to start kicking it off this summer with it. We've done 91 bids this year, and we've spent $24 million. I think last year we spent a little bit more, but we've started to try to spread the projects out a little bit more to realize some of our staff and to not overload them with that. So it might be a little bit different from last year, but we're well on our way to completing that FY23. So to create the capital renewal plan, we go through our facilities condition index system, which rates all of our building systems. Our environmental safety and assessment departments, they inspect those facilities yearly. They talk to the staff out there, and then I bring them in, and we print out all of those sheets where they have rated them, and we sit with our shops and our shop supervisors, and we ask tough questions, and we make them go out and look at the systems again sometimes and really bring back the information to us to tell us what is the highest need. And it's rated on what is the highest need out there. So we also do have some Safe and Healthy Schools Commission input with that, and you'll see that further along in the slides. But it takes us about 2 months to go through that in every shop and everybody to meet with and come up with those prioritized items. So you'll see as these go through, this is the typical format. You guys have seen it before, most of you. If you haven't, it's just an Excel spreadsheet that we put together, and want to kind of highlight a few of these. Read gym bleachers. They are lead containing. Anytime I work on them, I have to build containments and shut that school down to do that, and have to do it in the summertime. They are in poor shape. They've been there since the inception, since the construction of the school. So they are in need of replacement. And I think they'll be very happy to see some new gym bleachers with some ADA safeties on those as well, because even when I walk down them, I'm a little precarious when I do that. So next item I want to look at is the washer and dryers. I think we looked at this last year. It helps our custodians to wash their towels and rags for cleaning at the schools. So really trying to give them some of those little things that they need to do their job well. And a lot of them do have special education programs, and they can take advantage of that as well if they don't have one in that area. On the next page, we have Hidden Valley Fire Alarm. That is where we have our hard of hearing students. That system up there we cannot find replacements for. And so in doing this too, not only having not having replacement parts, but it'll have a visual for them that they so need with that hard of hearing students. So it'll help them with the strobes so they can actually indicate when there's a fire alarm and not. So that is a highly needed item at that school, and so happy to put that on this for this year's. The next one is the Duncan Playground. It is the steel playground structure. I don't know that most places don't have steel playground structures still left. And we're going to plan on replacing all of it. I know that through the facility modernization, this may be a school that comes up on high on the list. And we looked at that to make sure that with whatever we do, we can relocate that to other places if need be. So it won't go in and be forgotten if something changes it done, but we will be able to move that. And they need that severely up there. The next items that we have are some of the theater lightings. We don't think about those a lot with our schools, but that is an integral part of that curriculum is the drama and the theater. So in there are a lot of the theater lighting that we have to replace. It's as old as the schools, and so we're going to kick those off this year, which will help our electricians out in doing some of that work. I want to also highlight the STED boiler conversion. We're going to convert that just like we did at Echo Loader to create spaces there for some of the staff that needs offices. So really looking forward to that to create an area where our staff can have offices and have those special services for our students like our speech pathologists, our psychologists, and those people that need those offices in there. So we've taken the boiler out, so it's an empty room and used as storage. So now we plan to convert it for them to be used for those offices. And then the last one we have is our safety and security. We still have funding in there for our single point of entries to make some of those entries with the material that's needed to make them safe. We'll finish those in the elementary school. That should finish off our elementary schools. Emergency signing, this will probably be the last time you see emergency signage on there. That is we're going to get to finish that this go around for all of those emergency responses so they know what door to go into. So that'll finish that off. And then there is a line item in there to have safe and healthy schools prioritized items. So we will work with them. We're working on some options to talk to them about that for safety and security for the schools that are needed. I noticed that there is a little bit of secure perimeter fencing, and that is to modify a few of them that need modifications. They just don't make sense anymore the way they're using them, and so we're going to go in and modify them. And those are at some elementary schools to create that closed campus. We do put some program contingency. As you guys know, bids don't always come in perfectly. So we have a little bit of contingency if we choose to use it to award a project on this list. Construction management support, a lot of that is for inspections for us and to supplement our staff because we have, for instance, we go from Incline to Gerlach. It's nice to have in some of those areas some supplemental staff to help us with those inspections, and that's what that's used for. The program administration is for salaries of some of us in there and the bond program, but most of those people that work on actual projects are charged to the project. So we get a total project cost with that. But that also is for some of our staff. We have buyers in our purchasing that are coming and being funded out of that help us put our bids in. We have an accountant, 2 accountants that come out of that as well. I'm partially funded out of there because of managing the program. So that's what that is about. It's about copiers as well and our operating costs for it. I put on there the slide. It shows you the percentages of what each category gets, and we try to keep that really consistent from year to year. We spend a lot in mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, warm, safe, and dry. When the air conditioning doesn't work, it's a big deal, right? When the heating doesn't work. We do a lot in carpentry, which makes up a lot of our roofing. If we've got leaks, that's not a real good environment for our students. So this totals $50 million. Last year was $40 million, so we got to increase it a little bit. That extra 25% is intended to touch more schools in our district to complete these improvements for our building systems. I've said it before we had WC1, this was our bread and butter. This is what we did for our schools because this was the funding that kept those building systems up for them to create that learning environment. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Question? Go ahead.
Yeah, Tammy, on the emergency signage, since I sit on Safe and Healthy Schools, and this, for those of you who don't know, I mean, it was like low-hanging fruit, we thought. And it's simply numbering the doors at a school so emergency responders know, there's, medical emergency at door 4, or there's, an active shooter in door 6. But it was just such a simple idea, and it's taken longer and been more complicated than we thought. But does this budget, the $460,000, is that going to complete it at all levels or at all elementary, middle, and high schools?
That will complete it at all levels.
Perfect. That's the answer I wanted. Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions? Cobb.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. And again, maybe the distinguished, committee members already know the answer, but here we go. I had the distinct pleasure of having the coach of Reed contact me, and I spent quite a long conversation with him about the safety issue of the field. And I see that the $1 million allocated for the replacing of the large gym bleachers and the precarious stepping on those bleachers. I mean, we've all been in those situations. But the fact that it was a safety issue, at least from the conversation I had, I'm wondering where that comes into play. He had articulated a whole, he should be on a fundraising campaign somewhere. This gentleman was on a mission to help his children be safe and looking for opportunities for those children to play, and also to look at the ability for this particular team couldn't even host some of the competitions that really put them in a high ranking. So it was more, safety was his number one concern, but then the rest of it certainly seemed to be warranted. He explained the whole progression of various different turf that was used, the unusual, he knows the composite of the soil. This gentleman has done his homework, and I'm just wondering, where does fields, for instance, in terms of funding come into play? I don't see anything, and I may have missed it, and I apologize if I have, but I'm curious where that falls.
So any type of field work with that would be done under the grounds section in here. We also have, so every school, every high school has a groundskeeper and an assistant groundskeeper to help maintain that. We also have a district grounds crew that can go out and top dress and seed. So there are other ways that we could take care of that besides full replacement. At one point we had done some replacement of sod out there and done a turf management plan where we actually sampled the soil. We know what amendments it needs to actually be to grow in that, and actually turf management plan to teach the coaches how to practice on it so that it can maintain it throughout all the competitions. And grounds need to rest at some point. They can't be used all the time, otherwise you're just going to tear them apart. So we'll work with, that's one of our goals. We've been over to Reed, we've spoken to the staff, and we will work with them with our grounds department and their site department that they have to help maintain those grounds and help them with some solutions for that.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll be eagerly awaiting for you to arrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, a couple for you. On your paving one, you got the 5.3 and then your tracks. So didn't really have a list of where your intent, is that through PCI and dictating that?
Yes, they are our national standard for PCI. They are rated, and we will go through that rating to determine what gets done in there. I do have a list. We've come up with since we put this together, but we have a list of repairs or extend useful life as well as replacements, because we know once they hit the 5-year mark, they need to be slurried in order to maintain. And so we looked at some of our new schools. So we will be going back to some of our newer schools and slurrying them so that they stay in good condition, as well as reconstructing a whole bunch of those.
Okay. And then the other one on your safety and security, the 1.4 for the Safe and Health Commission, those are projects though, right? It's not, it's capital in nature.
They
like
will
a
be
project.
projects. They will be capital in nature.
Okay.
Any mention?
In our packet, we had another page, the capital renewal energy efficiency improvements. You were getting ready to tell us about it. Okay,
So
thank you.
Those are little projects that allow us to go in and do things to tweak our HVAC systems, or even we've done a Rainbird system for our irrigation to help us monitor and to utilize as little water as possible, while maintaining them in good condition, or electricity. You guys all know NV Energy's rates and that have gone up. We've been pretty successful in doing these small projects where we either put in VFDs, which are variable, frequency drives, to change the speeds of fans in that to be more economical and efficient, so that we can save power and not pay those high electric bills, water bills, all of those things. So those just are little things that we do, but they make a big difference in our utility bills and our other bills that we have for utilities.
Thank you for including it. I actually thought that was pretty cool to see. And you're right. In comparison to billions of dollars, it's a little amount, but it's nice to see some improvements being made. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tammy? All right, not seeing any. Thank you very much. That'll take us on to item 2.05, presentation discussion to provide updates on the construction phase progress and final recommended budget allocation for the Debbie Smith Career and Technical Education Academy High School. Ms. Zimmerman.
Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer, here to bring you a request in the next slide, next item for some budget, but I want to walk you through where we're at with this currently. You guys all know back in February of 2022, you guys approved and the board approved a budget of $125 million for all of the construction FF&E and construction management or professional services. We came back in May of 2022 with some bid results, and they weren't as positive as we would have liked at the time. We had a draft GMP of just the contractor, our CMAR, construction manager at risk estimate of $142.8 million for his draft. And that didn't include owner's contingency, so if you add that up, it would have been $147 million. And our construction was budgeted at $112 million, so we had a discrepancy in that because of the bids being over budget. So we had a couple options. We came back in June of 2022. We had three options: to award as is, but we didn't have the funding approved at the time for that. So, and then the next one was to pause indefinitely, and then the second one was to do a phased approach, and the third one was to pause indefinitely. And you guys approved the phase 2, which was to go and phase the project, option 2 to phase it, to allow us to do some value engineering and to look at the plans again and to take some of the risk out, but it delayed the opening until August of 2025 with that. So we did take advantage of option 2. We went back, we scrubbed it, we took and value engineered out some of the items that we didn't need to be in there to keep those programs in there. We talked about bidding of early procurement items. We all know switchgear is still more than 52 weeks out to get it. So those were some of the things that held us up. So we entered into the bidding and the construction of it in October of 2022 with the demolition, and we hard bid it. Q&D was gracious enough to say, you guys hard bid it. You guys can do that portion, and so we did, and we awarded it $7.6 million instead of what was estimated or what was bid previously at $15 million. Then we came back and we did the site and utility package with the Q&D CMAR, and we bid that in January of 2023, and in March we awarded it in March, and the CMAR estimated it and awarded it at $31.5 million. So it was a little bit more than we'd bid it, but we still went ahead. We had the funds to award that, so we awarded that. So if you've been up to the campus, you see there's a big difference in that campus because there are buildings that are actually missing out of it, and they're working on site and utilities. And so then the next phase that we have is the new building. There's a new building that goes in the center of campus, and then existing buildings that remained, we were going to renovate them to hold our academies that we have for this school. So for the new build, Q&D put that out to bid in April. We opened bids May 25th, which was last Thursday. We're still in the process of scrubbing them, but we're utilizing the estimate that's the CMAR Q&D provided us in April of total $114.9 million for that phase. So it's a little bit more than what we had originally estimated for it. And when we came back in, I came to you guys in February for the total. It's a little bit more than that. Then we also have the landscaping that we will hard bid. And we have received a bid for that even when we didn't ask for one. And that has consistently stayed at $2.5 million. So those are the estimates, and some of them we've moved forward with. We've moved forward with the demolition, the site and utility. we're hoping to move forward with the building, the new building and the existing building renovation once we get this additional funding approved. So the construction phase budget, the budget that was approved, I showed you before, was $112 million for construction, $8 million for FF&E, and professional services was $5 million. That was back in February of 2022. This, now in June of 2023, based off of the estimates we received from Q&D for April for that new building and the modifications or renovations in the existing buildings, plus the hard bid that we did of the demo, plus the site and utilities that we've awarded and what we would be awarding for or hard bidding for the landscape, construction is estimated at $155.5 million. And I want to stress that that is an estimate. We have contingency built on there. We did take some of the feedback that we had from capital funding to do an escalation clause in there. We have an escalation clause in there for contractors for material escalations, and the district, in our escalation clause, the district will take the first 10%, but there is a process they have to go through. Within 48 hours of their bid, they have to submit a sealed envelope with their materials in there so that we know what they estimated in their bid for that. There's also, they have to meet the procurement schedule. They have to meet the the submittal schedules and all of that in order to be eligible to get that 10%. Based on what we've seen, it's been very favorable that most of them have not asked for escalation because we've taken that phased approach and taken the time constraints of their bids, and instead of 24 months, they're only a year for them. So it's taken the risk out of it for the contractors as well as us. So that was a great move on our part and suggestion from you guys to do. It's helped us to take that risk from the contractor out because we felt like they were putting in their bids a lot of inflation. It still is, the FF&E is at $8 million and the construction professional services are still at $5 million, which leaves us with a total of $168.5 million. And today, later in the ask, you'll see, it's got an asterisk in there that it's an additional $43.5 million. I want to stress that it's a budget. We're scrubbing those bids, and we feel like we are going to be able to be in really good shape with this and not, hopefully not expend all of our budget for that. We're very optimistic. I can't say that, I can't give any more information than that because we're still in the scrubbing mode, but we've heard from Q&D that it is very favorable for us at this point. With that, I'll take any questions you guys might have.
Go ahead, Mr. Cobb.
Tammy, on your FF&E, just holding $8 million and we're several years later, because I know I'm paying a lot more for FF&E now, are you not shorting yourself there trying to hold that line?
When we went back through and redid the estimate, we still feel that $8 million is sufficient to do all the FF&E for that. A lot of the CTE equipment is in the contract with Q&D because it has to be installed. So it's more of the chairs and the tables and those kind of things because a lot of that FF&E or a lot of that CTE stuff has to be wired and all of that. So it's more, that's in the contractor's bids.
Okay.
No, go for it.
So, at the end of the day, I guess we got to step up and say we were wrong. We thought this was going to come in, or I don't know that we thought. We hoped that in a phased way this was going to come in cheaper by eliminating all the escalation that we felt as though the suppliers, the subcontractors, and the general contractor had in this project. And now we're going to basically looking at, and I'm sure even if it's favorable, it's still going to be more than our last estimate, which was $142.8 million. And if I'm not mistaken, we've also reduced the scope because we no longer have, we eliminated the, was it the boardroom or there's something that we took out from that was in the 142.8 million. So we've gone up, sorry, I'm looking at numbers on bush. We've gone up $26 million and reduced the scope. Is that what I'm basically seeing here?
Yes, you're accurate in that the estimate has gone up. We're relying on an estimate that was in March, right, from our Q&D construction. It also has bidding escalation in that estimate. It has $5 million of material escalation in there that we're not seeing. We can't confirm if we're going to be using it all. I have to put it in there because I want to be able to cover everything. That's the estimate that we received for material escalation. But there is escalation built into that above and beyond the base estimate from Q&D.
And then the numbers that you're expecting, that you're scrubbing now, those are truly going to be the final number? Because I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but we had final numbers. This is our fourth final number on this project now. So, or not, I shouldn't say that, because the first three truly were kind of guesstimates, not even estimates. They were where they thought this project was going to fall, and it kept going up and up and up. And I do recall that our chair actually said on a couple of occasions, "Are you sure that this is going to cover it?" And I guess my 2 cents on this is let's be, I would rather come in a little bit higher on what we approve to do the project, because right now, because we didn't come in higher last time, unfortunately, that was that's a $20 million mistake that we made at the end of the day. So, and that, it honestly falls on us. We were here too. We all thought, what are you kidding me? 112 is like way more than enough money here, right? So I'm just saying, please, let's make sure we've got, I don't mind if you got extra contingency and you give us money back at the end. That's what I'm getting at.
That's the plan. There's extra contingency in there so that we can complete the scope the way it is. We did have estimates. They were estimates. We even had third-party estimators to actually confirm them all the way along through the project. So I think something happened that none of us could have predicted. There is enough contingency in here to award the scope that we have in this project.
Glad you asked the question this time. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Ms. Bivey.
So Tammy, kind of piggybacking off Mr. Ivory, we didn't approve it initially when the 142 came in because we didn't have the money, correct?
Correct.
That fiscal year, I mean, when we were going to, it came in so much higher, we didn't have the funding to do it. And when you gave us the three options, of which we chose the second one, correct?
Correct. At that time, we did not have the funding approved to award the contract.
Okay. So now, and yeah, it is disturbing that I know inflation, because you're in the business of what all the costs are. Locking it in is really important. This has been a tough one because this is what we promised the community we would do. And I've already spoken to this at past meetings. The need for workforce in this community is urgent, and this school is going to provide that workforce that we so desperately need. So that for me is the most critical thing of why we need to get this done and get it done as quickly as we can. But fiscally, we've got to be mindful also. And I guess too, this has been frustration for me, but yet as I look at all the projects that we've done since WC1, everything has come in on time and under budget. This is the first one, and I think it was all timing. It was timing of when inflation rocketed and supply chain just caught up with everyone, because all of our other schools have really, I guess I we've been lucky that it's all worked, and this has been just a frustration that we need to get it built. It's tough. Those amount of dollars are tough, but, it needs to happen. And I don't want to wait another 6 months or a year because I see it only continuing to escalate and then us coming back. Well, do we have the money now? Well, will we have another 20 million or 30 million if it keeps delaying? And so glad to see the work out there when I go by and see when the demolition happened, it's like, yes, we're moving on it. So I appreciate all the work, but it is frustrating.
All right, any other questions, comments? Dis?
Ms. Zimmerman, I'm looking at the picture of the field, and Commissioner Andriola was talking about the fields at Reed before, and you made the comment, sometimes they need a break, to protect from wear and tear. I've heard there might be a university here in town that's got their eye on that field for women's soccer, possibly. When we have situations like that, my oldest goes to Jesse Beck, and I drive by on the weekends, and there's like organized soccer leagues going on in those fields. Do we have a lease agreement with organizations that want to use district facilities that, we have some income that we can put forward to the upkeep of those, or are we just giving away the time and the facilities for free? How does all that work?
So for items that we have joint use agreements with the cities, City of Reno, City of Sparks. So they have, where we have fields, Jesse Beck is one with the City of Reno. And they provide some assistance in maintaining those fields, fertilizer, mowing, those kind of things for them. It's really a joint. I mean, we use it together. We do have the ability to say no within those, it needs to rest, those kind of things. But there's such a need for fields within our community. It's very hard to say no to some of those sometimes. But we do, and when we lease them out to outside organizations, they pay a fee. I don't know that the fee is enough to help us to maintain them as well as they should.
We're coming close, though, I would hope.
They come close. I mean, we cannot make money off of it. We have to only make enough off the fee to take care of that property.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, that'll take us to item 2.06, presentation, discussion, and possible action. Mr. Searcy.
There we go. All right, thanks for hanging in there, folks. This is our last item on the agenda. It is an item for action. Just for orientation, you all have this spreadsheet, this ledger in your packet, but I always appreciate the opportunity to narrate through it. This program, list of projects on the left is almost exclusively identical from the 2016 ballot measure, WC1 ballot measure. So each of these items were listed with the exception of those asterisked. So for example, as we discussed tonight, the technology device refresh program has been an element of this program that we've added over the years, but relatively few of those are listed here, almost all of which have been previously or were identified in that ballot measure. So we've got the columns in purple. These are the total dollar amounts that have been allocated by this committee and ultimately the Board of Trustees. Those check marks are intended to represent, those red check marks, when the anticipated full allocation has been completed. And then the column on the far right is one that we update for every meeting. This one, as it states at the top, project balance status as of May 18th. So we run those reports and update the total committed. These are actual contracts issued against the budget that has been allocated. So you can see the delta in many cases coming in below the total amount that's allocated. Those green check marks are really reserved for those projects that truly are final. We're still seeing construction-related expenditures trickling in on some of the schools that we've technically opened, such as the new Hug High School. So you don't have a green check mark there, but 99.9% of the expenditures, capital expenditures associated with those projects have been committed. So that's just an overview. But really, the action before the committee here this evening is broken up into 3 line items. You heard 3 separate presentations this evening, starting with the FY24 device refresh program, followed by the FY24 capital renewal program, and then lastly, the supplemental and final construction phase funding for the Debbie Smith CTE Academy, really that delta to get us from what this committee's previously approved up to the updated final total that will allow us to complete the entirety of the project. So the action is agendized for a single action item, and the committee can discuss and approve at its discretion. Thank you.
And do we have any questions for Mr. Searcy? Not seeing any questions. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, not seeing any public comment, no discussion. I'm opening it up for a motion.
Take a shot at it, Mr. Chairman. Move to recommend approval of $98,200,000 to the 22-23D Major Projects Program for projects throughout the district, and to forward that recommendation to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for approval.
Got a motion by Dis, a second by Ivory. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That will take us on to item 3.02, just announcing that our next meeting will be August 3rd, 2023. So it looks good, so that should be on our calendars. So that's good. And with that, 3.03, this meeting is adjourned.